Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Chrysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey everybody, excited to be welcoming back Damon Pilstaka to the podcast. Damon is the co-founder of Exit Your Way, where they leverage their experience running investor-owned businesses to help private business owners create valuable businesses people want to buy. Damon, thanks so much for coming back on the Everyday Business Problems Podcast.
Thanks for having me again, Dave.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited to get into this conversation with you because I think, beyond building a friendship now for the last, 5 or 6 years, right? I think we share a lot of history in terms of how we kind of came up and the work that we do today. Mm-hmm. And so today's topic is all about approachable AI, right? AI without the hype, talking about the new newsletter that you're launching or have launched, I should say. Mm-hmm. And just talking about, kind of a builder's approach, like seeing the things that we see on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm excited to get into this with you and kind of cut through some of the noise that exists in this space.
Yeah. It'll be great. I'm excited to talk about it. So let's get rolling.
Yeah, man. So, let's just start with the newsletter, right? Like why this newsletter? Why AI without the hype? What were you seeing, kind of specific in this space that led you to say, you know what, I need to draft and send out a newsletter about this topic?
Yeah, it really started with the fact that, for the last couple of years since ChatGPT came out, I've been using it extensively and continuing to. It's actually growing more and more and almost crazy now. But what I kept seeing is, you can't go through Instagram without getting 10 different ads for this app, this AI thing, this AI thing, this AI thing. And now, just the proliferation of it is only going up, or whatever profile or platform you're on, you're going to see all these different things. And I tried them. I probably downloaded and tested 50 or more of these things across all different kinds of stuff. Right. And it came back to me real clearly that these are all fine and dandy if that's a real problem for you. But for me as a business owner that say I've got a $10 million business, my problem isn't sourcing new customers or leads and doing that, as I probably got somebody that's doing that. They might need that help, and overall my business might need that help, but it's not where I can make the biggest impact in my business. Because as you know, Dave, being an operations person, we have death by 1,000 cuts in businesses, and we're so used to it, we just keep putting Band-Aids on them, right?
Yeah.
And what I started to learn is that, when you talk about things like connecting my systems to an API, the computer interface that you can do, and specifically with like Claude Cowork or whatever you're using, it could be a different one, but that's one I use. Just seeing the power of that, right? Because connect my Claude Cowork with an API into my ERP system. You can just ask the questions.
Yeah.
You don't have to know anymore about, okay, how do I get this report? How do I formulate this? What are the analysis I need to do? It's like you start asking questions and it starts giving you data. It gives you reports. It'll show you how it calculated stuff. But when I started seeing that happen, I was like, man, this is a whole different level of what we can do, because it's beyond just making something faster. And this is where it really got me. It's making something that we couldn't before. Like, how many times have you sat in a business, you said, man, it'd be really nice for us to know this. That's the one thing. If we knew this, it would allow us to do Y.
Yeah.
And now a lot of those things, if the data is there, even in different systems and stuff, it'll pull it all together and give you that question, the answer to that question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, in terms of both connectivity across different platforms, and then even bringing in offline, pieces of data,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Things that don't necessarily live in a structured database. And again, utilizing that pattern recognition to be able to, better understand what, or get the answer to the question that you're ultimately asking. The other interesting part, and I'm sure you're seeing this, is what maybe took a few steps even prior to, right, like 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 18 months ago, is now kind of V1
Mm-hmm.
of with some of these newer models. So I'm curious, how has working with these tools and kind of the experience that you're amassing through learning, how has that shaped your, not just influence like what's come out in the newsletter, but I'm talking now more broadly, like with the work that you're doing, how is all of that testing and iteration kind of shaped, where you're starting the conversation with folks in terms of like what can even be done?
Yeah, it's really it's changed because and in fact, it just happened to me again today. We may think that we want to go, hey, let's automate this piece in the process. And then I was doing, like I said, I was doing this morning about a process. We need to automate it. We need it to be faster. It's just, we don't get paid enough, but it's a necessary service. We got to do it. And we just got to make it faster. And then I got to thinking about it a bit more. And I was like, well, if I add these two other pieces to it, it's completely automatic without anybody having to do it. Now it's scalable and it's profitable. And I don't care at that point. We can have people, we still need to have people monitoring. There's still people that have to make decisions and all these kind of things. There's still going to be that. But if I can go from, I'm speeding up a process, and one of my newsletters talked about this, into a process that we couldn't imagine before, and doing that, that basically does a lot of the work itself, maybe all of the work even itself. That's where we really can do things now, and we just couldn't do that before.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the ability to imagine solutions and iterate on them, right? Talk about, I think AI is tremendous. And I don't want to get, platform specific, because I do believe that there are strong suits for the different platforms and models, right? But that aside, the ability to kind of get to 80%, out of the 100 is pretty incredible in like first shot, type stuff, right? I'm curious how you're having conversations with owners and leaders around this idea that it's no longer, we can't imagine it, or the cost to build what we've imagined is, so out of touch. But how do we start to edit, what we should be building, what we should be experimenting with, back to the example that you had given about, it might not be in the purview of the owner or senior leadership, but it's certainly impacting the business at, a kind of localized efficiency perspective. How are you having some of those conversations with folks?
Well, it starts with the basics, right? Because this is the other thing that I've realized over the last couple of years of working with this, is that if you're going to try to work with AI in your business, you need to have somebody that understands your business well enough so that they can actually imagine these solutions first. And they have to have the AI understanding. They have to have the business understanding. So it doesn't work a lot of times when people go out and say, hey, I want to do this AI project. I'm going to go hire developers. They're going to build us these wonderful things. Well, if they don't know your process, it's so slow because they can't imagine the end point. And because like you said, getting to 80% is pretty easy when you see where you want to go. But if you kind of see where you want to go, or you're unclear about certain pieces of it as you go, that delays that process. So what I've really learned in this is that, and I talk about this with people, is like, listen, you really should have someone on your team, if you're a $10 million business, they don't have to be an AI expert, but they have to interact with your AI people enough to be able to go, okay, we're going to have detailed conversations about this, because the AI people at the very least have to have enough knowledge that they are really familiar with your process.
Yeah.
Or your inside people are working with that outside resource, if you're going to use an outside resource, and they are that interface, and they may even be doing some of the last tweaks and changes to things because they know specifically what it needs to do, and the long-term maintenance, because that's one thing that we didn't realize in the beginning when we started to get into AI with clients, is there's long-term maintenance costs on all this stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and even just some of the operating costs, right? Because we've in a couple companies we've implemented like inbound AI voice systems, directing calls and stuff like that. I mean, it's nothing to spend $500, $750 a month just on the AI cost for one of those things a month.
Yep.
So you really need somebody internally that can kind of shepherd this and learn alongside your AI people, because that intimate knowledge of the business itself is so key to getting these projects done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges set the technology aside, right? Nobody can argue the speed with which it is advancing, right? I think where I always land with it is that it's still a tool within our arsenal. And to your point, if we cannot connect, like the business outcome in terms of, strategic priority and kind of strategic direction, right? It becomes just like every other software purchase. It's a spot treatment at best that, delivers some localized efficiency. And at the end of that project, right, or implementation or configuration, we're left with dealing with the same underlying issues that we went into it with, so that I think is, the underlying tone that I end up seeing coming in. But to your point, right, if you're having those conversations, it's less about, what do we build? How is it going to be built? It's, all of these broader, kind of dynamics that need to be considered before a decision is made, and we start heading in a particular direction. So,
and you hit it right there, Dave, is that conversation. And the funny thing about that conversation is it hasn't changed over the last couple of decades, right?
I know.
We're still looking for the lever points in the business. We're still looking for the big things that if we move those biggest, that, hit that one lever point that gives us the biggest benefit, we really have to look there. Because if you're sitting here saying that, my admin people can't keep up with the workload, or we drop things, we miss things, and it's costing us thousands of dollars a month, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, you really have to look at the lever points that'll give you scale and better efficiency, and allow your people to do what they really do best. And that's make decisions when the systems don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But that lever point hasn't changed. And you can look at it you start with the financials of a business, and you can say, okay, listen, where are we at industry wise? Where are we at historically for us? And are we in a good position or a bad position, or where should we be moving? Yeah. And, it's just so many, it's the same question, but I always like to say it's the same question, but we've got a completely different tool set that's available to us now.
Yeah, there is no arguing that perspective, and there's been some really, really great things that have come out of it. I think ultimately what more broadly the market talks about from an AI perspective is really automation. What we know is automation, right? Yeah. And I think when I was thinking about some of the talking points for this episode, and just the general underlying tone of the newsletter, that was for sure one of the things I wanted to talk about with you, because I think we have like a real education gap around this stuff, right? Like, I've got some clients that have been pitched by these, marketing or, agencies, right? Automation / AI agencies. And they use a lot of the, lingo, I'll call right? But
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's underneath all of the marketing spin of it, right? It's talking about stuff that we've literally had the ability to do for decades, right? And I think that, it's that hype cycle that makes this stuff, I think, feel different, or, feel some sort of way. I'm curious to get your take on that, because I know you've been around long enough to understand kind of what I'm saying underneath,
Yeah.
the hype and the marketing spin of what we've had the ability to do. But to your point, it's the same underlying conversation,
Yeah.
and understanding those levers that are going to help us, get to a result that is valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the hype around it is just because business owners are in a conundrum right now. And I feel because they see other people, you read it, every bit of news, right?
Yeah.
Is this company did this or they had this, that, and it's all that. And they go, we got to spend some money on it because we know we've got to be doing it, but we don't know where to start. But, the right agency walks in the door at that time, they go, oh, that's kind of what we're thinking. Maybe we go down that road, and they're ready to invest in it. So they spend some money, right? But again, it comes back to the point of it's not hype. It's like, where are your basic problems that prevent you from scaling faster, right? What are the things? And you got to think of the things that have been there forever.
Yeah.
Like we can't do this because, and you go, well, has that really changed today? We can't process orders fast enough. We can't turn quotes in 4 hours, right? There's no way we could quote $100,000 quote in 4 hours. Well, what if there was? What would you have to do? It's just like days when we were really doing business. I think of it's a lot like lean business development, right? Or not business reorganization.
Sure.
We used to always go, okay, if we want to go from 6 weeks down to 10 business days in our lead time, no, we can't do it. What do we have to solve to get there? We just keep asking that question, because what we couldn't solve before, the one that hung us up before, might not hang us up now.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Because just like I said, in the quoting example, for a $100,000 quote, it may not, we'd have to pull all the bills and materials. We'd have to do this. We'd have to do that, go connect with those suppliers. Well, you think about it. What if I've got connectivity with all my suppliers by API? What if I've got past examples of estimates for the same kind of work that's relatively close? I mean, we're talking about those kind of things go away or are drastically reduced. So thinking of something that takes us 1, 2, 3 weeks in that quoting or estimating example, because we're waiting for suppliers and us to get it around and us to formulate it and put it into something that looks decent, you literally can now set that up once, have the humans interacting with the system when they need to and helping it decide, and it can come out in hours.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is a whole different ballgame, because we have the connectivity. We have the piece that takes the ambiguous and puts it and sorts it and puts it into order for us. Yep. And then we have on the other end, when we go, okay, I'm an estimator. I don't like to make pretty proposals, right? And make them look right. Well, now that's something that does pretty darn well. So we look at all this and we go, wow, this can make a huge difference.
Yeah. I love the lean example. I mean, the one that I always kind of pull from is the SMED, right? Single minute exchange of dial. I'll never forget being in manufacturing and hearing like that term the first time and being like, what are you smoking, man? Like, you're telling me that we're going to take a 3+ hour changeover and get it down to like an hour? Like, that's just bonkers to me. Right.
Yeah.
But it's the same concept. And I think, ultimately, what's so exciting about this kind of moment in time, right, for folks that are curious and, I won't even call folks that need to be builders, right? Because you don't need to build it yourself, but you need to be curious. You need to be imaginative around what's possible, kind of to your point, right? And just thinking through, like, but what if it wasn't, like, what if that wasn't a barrier for us? right?
Yes.
I understand where you're coming from for current state and, where things are at, but what if it wasn't? What if we could, and thinking through all of those different things. And then again, being able to prioritize those in the sense that what is really slowing the business down today? Because again, what's really easy to get in the habit of with tools that are now available to us is this localized efficiency piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
These spot treatments, we've tackled some symptoms, and it's not saying that there's no good that comes out of it, but if we want to talk about what grows a business, right? What goes from 10 million to 15 to 30 to 50 million, it's not going to be, some spot treatment stuff, right?
No.
It's going to be cutting through to the root cause layer and tackling something at that layer to be able to unlock some scale for a business.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm just curious, like, if the conversations that you've been having, with the business owners and leaders that you've been working with are kind of fall into that same line, how you're able to keep them thinking about those root cause, levers, back to your point.
What we've really begun to realize in these conversations is that what we're really doing is we are standardizing workflows across the organization, and we're beginning to build workflow systems. And it's much different because, ERPs in the past, they're always like, oh yeah, they do it kind of, right? They do it kind of, and you're only limited to what they've built, yeah. Right? So now when we talk about, mentioned it earlier about, the fact that we can eliminate reporting if we can surface the right information to each person in the business at any given moment, right? And then when we combine that with the other things that AI can do in the background, like it can handle some tasks, it can notify people of tasks, it can go out and do the things it needs to do in other places. But when you start to look at that, the overall business, and we go, what's been holding us back? We're going to find two things, and this is pretty universal. We don't know nearly as much about how the work is done that we thought. And as you do that, you're going to find steps in the process. You're going to say, hey, Damon's over here and he's doing this, and I don't know why he's doing it, but he's been doing it forever.
Yep.
Okay. Elimination. You always say that. Delegate, eliminate, or what's the other? You got
Automate.
Automate, right? Yeah. So, we're really looking at this. And I think even in one of the last later episodes of the newsletter where it's coming out, I went back even to my earliest work when I was doing industrial engineering, and we were automating processes where we do thousands of something a day. And you're like, and watching people do it, right? You'd say, pick up gear, put on shaft, blah, blah, blah. You have to get in that level of detail when you're looking at the automation of these things, because there's so much of these steps that are just happening because we're intuitive and we can handle this. But when you break it down at that level, you realize it's just option A, option B, option C, or this is what the workflow is. And to do that before was such a monumental task, but now with the iterative capabilities, you can build a rough MVP in no time.
Yep.
And you can build onto it and keep adjusting to get it better and better over time. But halfway through, we might have this piece of the workflow automated enough so it's really valuable to the people right now. It's showing them what they need to work on right now. That could be huge because there's no running reports. It's just right there on the screen, and it's updated continuously as they're working. That's a huge thing for some people. What's the oldest I need to work on? What's the most important? Whatever those things are. But these workflow systems, when you really look at it, it allows you to understand where are our bottlenecks and what are the things that we need to work on first to allow us to scale.
Yep.
Because as you know, from the operations world, we always look for the bottleneck. What's the one place that's slowing us down? And when you find that, just like this, you can work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, ultimately that's the value that, outside counsel can help to bring, for any business, right? Like, and I know we love to talk about this stuff. And so it's not, a plug, a paid engagement plug, right?
No.
But it really is about what I've found is it's asking the right questions and thinking through those things. And that's the real, value, that lens of experience, that being in 50, 100, 200 businesses and seeing these same types of things play out across sectors, across sizes, and understanding like, how do we get from A to B? And for me, it's asking the right questions, right? It's understanding the critical thinking elements that people take for granted, both individual contributors and leadership folks, right? They take those critical thinking elements kind of for granted. So how do we capture those? How do we surface those? How do we prioritize those in a way that, again, we can look for not just the localized efficiency win by, making Damon and Dave faster, or increasing their utilization, but, scaling that human horsepower, right? Giving them the most critical tasks, the relationship building, all of the things that require a tremendous amount of judgment. How do we surface that, right? Like, and let you just hammer that, day in and day out, right? And I'm curious, like I know the answer from my perspective, but when you're doing this work, across the organization, do you find that people are, kind of lifted up by the fact that they are now, I like to use this term like admin overhead, right? Like no matter what part of the business we're talking about, there's like this work that is required to get to, executing and ultimately achieving an output. But do you find that the people get energized by the fact that like this admin overhead gets offloaded somewhere else and that they're kind of doing their best work now? Like, what's the feedback you're hearing from, the folks that are doing the thing as you're introducing some of these, tools and automated workflows?
I tell you, when you begin to put the right information in front of people in real time, that's huge. I just, last week, someone was just telling me, it's like, wow, this is a completely different way to do business because now I'm not looking here, 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 here. You put it in one place. I can see what I need to work on. I might click a couple toggles to make it look exactly what I want, but I can see it in the different ways. So Damon knows when he's working, this is my first priority, this is my second priority, this is my third priority. I don't have to go anywhere else. And a lot of times we're building that so that's like this workflow system and your ERP are, I've got 2 monitors, this is what I've got going, or I've got 3 and the third's an email, whatever it is. But those 2 are made to work hand in hand because we have a system of record, which is like an ERP, and we have the workflow system, which manages all the other stuff. And the really cool thing about it from a management perspective is when we start to go lead time, when we start to how long does it take a process to do, when I have a workflow system that says, hey, we received an order on this date, the materials were ordered on this date, it was shipped on this date. Yeah, it's in that system too. But when I have a completely separate management dashboard, that's what my people can see. If that, my operation person, that's really important to them. If my purchasing agent is looking, if we're looking at accounts receivable, if the financial people need to go, it's like, how are we doing in each one of those areas? Yeah. That workflow system gives that measurement that's hard to get from the system of record.
Yeah,
they button it onto them, but it's not like we can now and make it totally custom. So even like in one client, I mean, there's some of the real benefits of working in like a Microsoft Azure environment because I can, based on Damon's login, it's completely different than Dave's.
Yeah.
And when you start to do that, this is super cool with the people working in the different areas. Yeah. But it's just getting that information in front of people is such a huge thing.
Yeah, I think to your point, right? Like one of the neatest parts about how quickly things are moving and the tool set today is, again, even the reporting. It's not like we couldn't do some of that reporting previously, but the lift it took to iterate and to get a different view of the same thing compared to what we can do today, and to spin up a dashboard and to say, you know what, this isn't quite what I thought I was going to be looking at. Let's pull in this part of it, or let's add, this other unstructured element to it. And you know what, how does this data set compare to this other thing I've been thinking about, right? In terms of maybe strategic direction or iteration. And I think, to me, that's the, thinking about AI as, a thought partner and a brainstorming session, and taking these elements and then bringing those together. I think the ability to do that, the speed with which you can do that today, is just incredible. And I found it really gets people thinking, both at the senior leadership level, across the org. And even if it's just spurring conversation, I think it's really, interesting what is happening with businesses that are bringing it in, that are introducing it in a very intentional, an intentional way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it does. And I think, just once you start interacting with the AI, right, we're building things, we're seeing some improvements, there's the powerful step after it. It's like, hey, we built this. This is our goal. We're kind of here. What do you think? You talk about being a thought partner, because what happens is our knowledge base is narrow.
Yeah.
AI's knowledge base is much wider, may not be as deep as ours in some areas, or specific as ours is, but that wide range is really wild, because it could go, well, if I was going to do this, this is what I would do, X, Y, and Z, because of these reasons. And it can bring up something that you wasn't even in your realm of thinking.
Yeah.
And it could be a game changer for you.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
That's the kind of thing that really helps, and this, it comes back again though, and without, we have to talk about it. You can waste an inordinate amount of time with AI. I mean, literally 4 hours just goes like this.
Right.
So you have to be focused on this, right? You got to make sure we know what we're doing when we're doing this, and we don't get squirrel brain and go too far left or right, because that, like we said before, that same lever point that we're trying to address, we have to address that and then move to the next one.
Yeah. I think one of the, to bring it back to the newsletter itself, I think one of the things I appreciate about it specifically is the structure that you've built within it. And I think, whether we're talking about, individuals, small businesses, right, up through enterprise, I think, thinking through the structure with which we're bringing AI into the conversation, I think is a struggle for a lot of, senior leaders, individual contributors, the like, right? So one of the things I appreciate is how you've structured the actual newsletter, kind of breaking it down, your perspective on things, talking about specific tools, talking about other specific resources. What kind of, what were you thinking about as you kind of drafted what the actual structure looks like? Because I think that's part of the value, honestly, out of the resources I've tapped into. I think that structure, adds a lot of value, because it's not just I mean, of course it's your perspective, right? But it's deeper than that. And you're also sharing other resources that, that you've come across.
Yeah. My thought was share the real world things that I get to see as much as possible.
Yeah.
And see that it's not the end all be all, right? Because as I talk about AI, and we're talking about AI right now, the long term for many of these things, like these workflow systems and other things, AI is just a small piece in it, because it's used at the right point. The rest of it is AI has enabled us to build code and do other things, interact with other systems, because of the way it can connect, that we couldn't do before. So I really wanted to expose that, because everybody thinks you should be able to just type something in and it's going to do something. Well, it may do that someday, But I'm going to tell you, if you're in something that is like manufacturing based or something where you numbers based, where you have to be specific, AI is not the best tool to do that, right?
Yeah.
There's simple ground and pound Python or something like that
Yep.
that is, it's 1 + 1 always comes out 2.
Yeah.
It's not 1 + 1 could be, that's the kind of stuff that you really need to understand. And that's what I wanted to show is that, listen, it's not the end all be all, but what it does is it puts a tool set in front of us that is far greater and it's crazier that we could ever imagine, really, in a lot of ways. So that's why I broke it down. It's like, hey, what are some situations that I ran into, conversations I had that could be interesting? What are some tools that I've uncovered that it's like, wow, this is really interesting? And then really pulling in some of the best newsletters, because I'm a newsletter junkie. I subscribe to way too many, but I got them. They all go into one place, the AI newsletters, right? And it helps me by wading through the however many a day I get and say, hey, here's some articles that might be good. And then we compile those for the whole week. And we go, hey, what are the best articles we've found that are here's some options. Tell me which ones you want to do, and I mean, because there's so many people moving so fast in so many different ways with it. It's, you really have to look at the practicality of it. And then where are people really sharing these practical uses and good applications?
Yeah.
Because it's just back to those lever points in your business. How can I use this new tool set to drastically change the way that works?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of, information in the market, I'll say, whether it's a newsletter or content or, some other thing, book, webinar, or course, right? But I think so many people lead with this is the answer, this is the end all be all scenario. And if we've learned anything being in business, as long as we collectively have, right, it's like there's 100 ways to solve this problem, right? Like, what are your resources? Where are you at today? Where are we trying to go? And my answer for a business that's, growing by trying to capture market share versus one that's acquiring a competitor, that answer is generally going to be different, right?
Yes.
Depends on a variety of other factors too. But, I think just the idea that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of value in the practical expertise and application of the tools, but more broadly unpacking why this versus that. It's back to the, teach a person to fish, analogy, right? And so I think that's why I have appreciated reading what you've been putting out there, because I feel like that's the lens with which it comes across. Cool. It's just like a conversation like this, which is, again, why I wanted to have you back on the show and to talk about it, because, I think there's too much of that hype cycle out there. There's too many thought leaders, trying to be thought provoking or just plugging AI onto the back of whatever they're already selling, it gets frustrating, I think, being surrounded by that, versus wanting to be in a room where people can talk and be curious and, share stories and examples of real things that they're working on or that they've, built for clients.
When you're doing the ground and pound work that makes you more efficient, helps you make money faster, make more money on what you're doing. I mean, it all comes back to those lever points again. It's not, there's not an easy button. It's just like we've seen in business for the decades. But when you do put the effort into it, you can find things that your competitors probably aren't.
Yeah.
And again, I've always been one that speed in business is the number one way to win. You got to have quality too. Don't get me wrong. Quality's got to be there. It's got to be as higher than everybody else. But speed to market is such it just sets you apart by so much, right? Because and that initial, it's response to a question, it's response to a quotation, it's speed to getting something made. It's just, that is when you can beat your industry average by 50% or something like that, you're setting yourself up for some success, because you have to be really efficient to go that fast, because you wouldn't be a business if your quality was crap or we weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing.
Yep.
But if you can do this stuff, so it's like boom, 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 it's so good for you and everyone else in the business and your customers.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's, the fundamentals win time and time again, no matter what we're talking about, they really do.
It is. And it's just, like I said before, to me, this is just like a giant tool set that's been handed to us that we just need to see how to apply it in our business, and, get the right technical help if that's and do whatever else. But man, it's changing so fast now, because it's almost fixing itself, making itself better, which is scary, but it is. But the other side of this is that it's getting to be more and more of like an immovable object that's or something that's moving towards us, and we just have we have to either deal with it or get run over by it. Yeah, and that's the thing, because when you just think of what you do. And if you do something today, and to look at, I always talk about Amazon Prime and how that changed the entire retail thing when we said, hey, get there in 2 days, get there next day now.
Yeah. And get there in an hour now. Right?
Yeah. Get there in an hour. And, I just read an article last week about how Walmart is now beginning to leverage their physical location, their stores, to try to do that within less than an hour, kind of shipping for at your door for everything. And, that speed again is so critical, because we want what we need now.
Yeah. I think, again, I think that's why I've always appreciated, learning from you and talking to you. And, just like we said previously, whether we're talking about it through the lean lens or, SPED, any of those stuff, right? Like, at the end of the day, the way to articulate it best is 15 years ago, nobody would have ever thought it was possible, right? Coming out of the retail environment, big malls, right? All these things, people would have looked at you sideways to say, there will be a time in our lives that we get frustrated that something isn't at our doorstep within a day. Right. Yeah. Like, and that's the reality, right? Like people, exude frustration if, shipping isn't included. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's not there in a couple of days. If you go to a retail store, there's limited selection. You can't get the things that you want. I could go to, not to call them out, right? It's like, I can go to Best Buy, not get what I need, order it from Amazon, and be here in an hour. Yeah. How is that possible? Right. They're both managing inventory. Right. And it's incredible to be thinking about that. And I think, a takeaway for me is reframing the questions around what if it is possible, and not lead with the, we can't do this because, and think through, well, if that isn't a barrier, what door does that open within our business, and be thinking through, how do we capture those ideas, not lose sight of those, and ultimately, work towards prioritizing those in a way that streamlines, the operation. So,
yeah. And it's interesting how you articulated that, because I see it happening. Is like we go with our best intention of like, this is going to be a great solution. Yeah. And you're learning adjust that path, and you'll end up in a place that you never knew was possible, because as you see, and you get different ways of doing things and different ways of combining things, you get there and you go, wow, we are way farther than I ever imagined we could be, because what we learned along the way, and then how it affects everything else and our next decisions that we're doing is so crazy. It's a multiplier almost.
Yeah. I mean, like what you said there, it just resonates, because I think every business, right, that's still in business and has lasted some length of time, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, we've grown into wherever we're at today. It's like every decision that we made was made with good intention, right? Like it always starts from a good place and a well-meaning place. And no matter if that's like a software purchase, an equipment purchase, hiring another team of people. And I think, again, to your point, like the thing that this unlocks for us is this infinite ability to iterate and think through and brainstorm and question today's reality in this kind of pursuit of what if, what if this isn't the thing and this is the thing, but it also requires an extreme amount of, diligence, I guess, if you will, from the perspective of like, well, we can't get sidetracked over here, right? Like we're a manufacturing business. We are not in business to create a industry specific ERP unless we're going to be standing up a new business that is, going to build an industry specific ERP, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I forget who it was this last week or the week before mentioned they're going to move away from Salesforce because they're vibe coding their own, At enterprise level, you got hundreds of users, thousands of users. That might be something, but it's, my experience in these smaller businesses, it's just connecting and using the systems you've got. Yeah. It's not about, that type of project would be something that's far beyond them, and you would probably never see the payback on something like this. Your payback comes in, better decisions, less time spent on putting things together, and more time spent and making good decisions based on this information that we can see quickly now. So interesting.
Yeah, I love it. For anybody that's out there listening, Damon, where's the best place for them to find you? How do they subscribe to the newsletter? Give us all the details, and I'll make sure to add that stuff.
Look at my name. Look at my name, and then on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can find it there. And we may be moving it to email here later, but we wanted to try it out on LinkedIn, and we're moving forward that way for now.
Nice. Well, I love it. Cool, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Always an incredible conversation, and looking forward to following along.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Chrysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Chrysler.